I drove carefully through the late evening traffic, heading across London toward the Marriott Hotel. My mind was swarming with thoughts of all sorts of atrocities, which I pondered as an appropriate response to my situation. No matter what happened in the next few hours, the lives of at least 3 people would never be the same again, and how many of them would even be able to live after this night remained to be seen. My name is Sal, short for Salvatore. I am of Italian descent. My parents have lived in the UK since the late 1960s. The family business is the ubiquitous Italian restaurant, which has been the mainstay of my family and the many cousins and other relatives who make up the extended part of it. We are a very close-knit family, but unlike in times past, we don't live with each other on a daily basis. Family events are always crowded, and no one wants to be the one who isn't there, and suffer the stares of my grandmother, the matriarch, the one who must always be obeyed. No matter what, I married Connie 7 years ago, both of us in our early 30s at the time. It was as if we were drawn to each other after a relationship that was going nowhere, and in a way, although satisfying, it lacked what was required for a long-term relationship. We dated, partied, and had fun for almost 2 years before deciding and getting married. My grandmother never liked Connie. She seemed to just tolerate her. She was never overtly rude, but there was always a look of distrust in her gaze at Connie, as if she was waiting for her to somehow cross the line, as if she had her finger on the trigger, waiting for it to happen. How do women know or sense these things? It defies my comprehension. At times she struggled to hide her feelings for my wife, but she never voiced her opinion in front of strangers. She said to me shortly before we were married, "Watch out for that Sal. She has that look in her eye. Be careful and always guard your heart." That was all she said, but somehow her words echoed in my mind like a backdrop as I drove through the traffic-filled streets of London. There was no hurry. I knew exactly where I was going, and if there were any changes or alterations to my evening, I would get a text or a call on my cell phone. I joined the flow of traffic on Marylebone Road, which was quite dense as usual, even though the time was well past 9 p.m. The bright lights of the city glowed in the darkness of the streets, and I turned toward the city center when my heart and breathing seemed to quicken. It won't be long now, I thought to myself. Then this farce will be over. A month ago I found out that my wife was regularly seeing a guy and doing the dirty deeds with him, well, at least once every 2 weeks. This had been going on for at least 6 months, as I found out after doing a little digging. How did I find out? It turned out to be very simple, even simpler than I would have thought. She made a tiny mistake one night that made me think that all was not well. That day I found a pen. It was one of those cheap pens they give you in hotels. I couldn't figure out where it came from, but I know I haven't stayed at this particular hotel before. I always use a reputable chain when I have to travel, which is usually once a month. I save up loyalty points, but it's not that big of a deal. Anyway, one evening when we were out walking, I asked Connie if she had a pen, and she pulled out this biro from her bulky purse. As soon as I finished using it, I saw the inscription, and a little alarm bell rang in my head. I knew I wasn't staying at this hotel, and I couldn't think of any reason why my wife would have a pen from this hotel, so I was somewhat puzzled. Connie put the pen back in her bag without a word. I didn't say anything, but decided I needed to look into it and see if there was anything I should be worried about. It may have been small and insignificant, but it was a tiny crack in our marriage that could be the source of cataclysmic consequences. I can't explain why, but at that point, I just put it out of my mind and didn't dwell on it as we met up with friends to eat and drink. It was kind of a regular thing where me and 2 other couples would meet up from time to have dinner and then enjoy a few drinks and a little dancing at the end of the night. We were sitting at the lounge bar of our favorite restaurant when the proverbial pen appeared. It was our usual spot, cozy, casual with a relaxing atmosphere. Plus, it was run by one of my cousins, so of course there were healthy family discounts in effect, which my family in turn reciprocated. The discounts were enough to show respect, but not so much as to offend the owner. Respect was given and received. It was a two-way thing that worked. The other 2 couples were Carlo and his wife Joanna, and Phil and his wife Terry. Carlo and Joanna were older than us by 5 years or so. We were related to them, distantly of course, but still family. Carlo was a bit old-fashioned in some respects and led an interesting life, although not everything about it was within the law. When Connie had first met him, he had startled her, but a nicer, kinder, and gentler man could not have been wished to meet. Unless you upset him, one word don't. Carlo was like a big brother to me. He was always there for me, kept me out of trouble, and once or twice handled a problem or two with ease. His wife Joanna was a lovely woman. She adored Carlo, and they were the perfect couple. He was large, she was petite, pretty, but also feisty. She was the only person Carlo feared. He adored her, and he didn't care who knew it. I met Phil at my job, and as it turned out, we got along very well. He was the same age as me and had a similar outlook on life. We played golf together from time to time and socialized with his wife Terry at the golf club, so it was all good. Terry got on with Connie, and they would often spend days on end spending huge amounts of money buying God knows what, and spending a lot of time doing it. All I ever saw were the big bags that Connie would bring in the door after one of these expeditions. Where Phil was always warm and friendly, Terry seemed to loop at times, especially lately. Then she seemed to snap out of it and become part of the group. I often thought there was something wrong with her, and I mentioned it to Connie more than once, but she just brushed it off with the usual woman problems that seem to be invented when a woman doesn't want to explain something. We were sitting in the lounge area sipping cocktails when Carlo and Joanna walked in. I stood up and greeted him, and we all hugged and exchanged kisses. The waiter brought fresh drinks to our table just a minute after Carlo and Joanna joined us. Connie was always amazed at the way we were taken care of when we went somewhere. My cousin knew there were 6 of us and indicated that our table was ready. We were ushered to our usual corner table, secluded but facing the door, something Carlo always insisted on wherever he went. But we didn't bother to ask him why. Our Phil and Terry coming asked Joanna to Connie. I spoke to her earlier and she said they're definitely coming, but they might be a little late as Phil hasn't gotten home yet. Carlo just looked at the 2 women and glanced at me. I looked at him, but he just shook his head imperceptibly, and I left it at that. But I'd ask Carlo about it later. As we finished our first round of drinks, Phil and Terry showed up, both looking a little flushed, but there was more to it than that. Carlo just stared at them, his face expressing nothing, impassive. I saw that look again, that he knew there was definitely something there. We sat down at the table, and were soon chatting about work, our days, and the usual conversations about families and kids. After a great lunch, we made our way back to the lounge area, and music was in the air. By this time, the girls were itching to get on the dance floor and work off some of the calories they had gained. We, 3 guys, sat for a while, sipping another batch of cocktails and talking non-stop. Discussing, of course, sports and admiring the beauties performing in front of us. Our wives giggled and cheered. The dance floor was busy to the max. There was a lively crowd here tonight, nothing outrageous or out of control, just people having a good time. The girls had returned to our table and were sipping their drinks when the music switched to a slower tempo. It was a signal for us to do our duty and see them off. I felt Connie pressed against me, causing a response to which she grinned. She continued her endeavors, and I was already thinking of ways to get her home. After the first number, Carlo led Joanna back to the table, and when I looked over, I saw Phil and Terry still on the floor, but they seemed to be a little stiff together. "Is everything okay with those 2?" I whispered to Connie. "Yeah, I guess so." But Terry didn't say anything. I looked around again. Something was clearly wrong. Connie pulled me away and tried to distract me. We walked back to the table. Carlo just smiled at me and Joanna giggled. Phil and Terry walked over to the table. Terry grabbed her purse and announced that she was going to the bathroom, which signaled the exodus of the women, and we 3 guys were left sitting looking at each other. "Everything all right, Phil?" asked Carlo coolly. "Yeah, sure, no problem, but probably too much." He raised his glass and pointed to another portion. Fresh drinks arrived before the women had even returned from the conference. Terry slid into the booth with Phil, their body language giving them away. Connie looked at me. Something in her gaze told me that all was not well here, and she looked away. We glanced over, trying our best not to mention the elephant in the room. Carlo nudged me with his knee under the table. I looked back and he winked at me. He knows something. A few more dances with changing partners as we usually did, helped ease the tension until it was time to leave. My cousin called a cab at the prearranged time, and we prepared to leave. I looked over and saw Connie talking to Phil at the other end of the room. They seemed animated, and at the same time consciously trying to look cool. I noted this as another oddity of the evening and decided I would ask her about it later, or maybe not. We said our goodbyes and the cab took us in different directions. "So what's up with Phil and Terry?" I asked bluntly. "Nothing. They're fine." She smiled and looked out the window at the lights whizzing by. I sat in silence, not for the first time thinking that something was wrong here. I didn't know what, but something was happening. I decided I would contact Carlo in the morning. That night, Connie tried to shake my brains out of me, but even with the alcohol inside me, I was giving as much as I was getting. "Wow, that was awesome, baby. We should do it again and real soon." She smiled at me. "I hope you remember that I love you and want it all over again, Sal. I love you, Sal. Don't forget that." I looked at her. She seemed strange. There was some hint in her, but I couldn't figure out what it was. "I love you too, baby. Don't ever forget that. You're my wife. No one will take you away from me, and I'll never give you a reason to." I hugged her tightly, covering her face with kisses. We fell asleep, and I lay staring at the ceiling, remembering the strange events of the evening. I should call Carlo first thing. The next morning, Connie was up and out the door to head to the gym early, and I hung around the house drinking glass after glass of orange juice to clear my head. I sat down at my laptop and Googled the name of the hotel that was written on the pen I'd seen in her purse. The search yielded results, and I checked the location. The hotel was on the other side of London from us, but it was easy to get to. There was parking on site. It looked very posh. I wrote down the phone numbers and email address, but saw that they also had the option to book online. I had to check the history to see if there was anything there. I checked nothing. Nothing at all. The history had been wiped clean. I smelled another rat. My paranoia was getting out of control. I called Carlo. "Carlo, it's Sal. So what's going on with Phil and Terry? I get the impression you know something. Should I be worried?" "Sal, meet me at my brother's bar around mid-afternoon. Then I'll tell you everything I know. But it better not be over the phone, okay? Of course I'll be there. Sal, go on your own, okay?" "Yes, of course I understand." The line cut off. Now I was worried. Did I need to be? Screw it. I was worried. I sat staring at the phone while my stomach began to slowly flutter, and I didn't like what I felt inside. An hour or so later, Connie bustled through the door. She looked refreshed, her hair still damp from her shower, and a blush playing on her cheeks. "Did you have a good workout?" I asked. "Yeah, that was great. I needed that, babe." She threw her purse on the table and tossed her gym bag on the floor. "I'm going to see Carlo. He wants to talk about something, but it won't take long." "What does he want, Sal?" "He still gives me the creeps, even though he's a kitty. Yeah, he's a great guy, but I wouldn't want to get on his good side, no way. And don't ever confuse him with a kitty cat." "I won't be in love for long, okay?" Connie looked at me. Another look I couldn't read. What the hell is going on? There's a vibe coming from everyone around me that's starting to bother me. I got into the car and drove slowly across town to Carlo's brother's house. It was a large, inconspicuous building that housed a luxurious and trendy North London bar. Well, not exactly a bar, more like a drinking club for those in the know. No sooner had I pressed the buzzer than the door opened, and Carlo stepped aside to invite me in, giving me a quick glance outside as if checking to see if I was being followed. I watched him curiously. "Okay, Carlo, what the hell is going on? Your call made me freak out, and with a few other things going on, I'm getting worried. And I don't know what to worry about, if anything." He looked me in the eye and said, "Follow me." I followed him through the bar into the back rooms, where there was an office set up as a workspace. He closed the door behind me, and we sat down on either side of a large oak desk. "Sal, you are very dear to me, so I want you to listen to me carefully. I promised your old man that I would always take care of you, and I'm not breaking my word. What I'm going to tell you is going to hurt, but you have to listen to me, okay? I flinched when I saw the pain in his eyes. My mind raced through the possibilities, but deep down I knew it had something to do with my wife. My heart pounded in my chest. This man had been close to me all my life. I knew my father was as close to him as he was to his own son. He was a cousin, but had lived with us since he was a child. I knew almost nothing about his parents, only that they had been murdered together. My father immediately made arrangements and took him in. He was my brother from then on. He opened the top drawer of the desk he was sitting at and pulled out a large manila envelope, carefully holding it out to me. My eyes were fixed on it like a poisonous snake ready to strike. I knew instinctively that once I opened the envelope, my life would change forever. Just as I slowly reached for the snake, Carlos's hand came down on it. I looked up fearfully and saw the pain in his eyes again. "That's bad, isn't it?" He looked at me and held my gaze. Nodding slightly was all he gave me. "Sal, remember I'm here for you, okay?" He lifted his big hand and I pulled the snake towards me. I picked it up and felt it get heavier. I think it was full of venom. Carlos watched me pull the contents of the envelope from its hiding place, and when I opened it, I saw the poison that had begun to work on my mind and heart. I saw pictures, large glossy shots of a woman and a man doing it. They were easily identifiable. They were in a cheap hotel room. There were others obviously taken at a different time, and in more normal surroundings, and looking through a shroud of tears, I saw my wife on our own bed naked with a man. Sal, are you okay?" I kept flipping through the pictures and each one hurt my heart, the ache in my chest growing as I watched my marriage disintegrate before my eyes. I looked up at Carlos, my face wet with stinging tears. "What? How? When did you do that? Who is he?" My eyes widened with shock, fear, and a little bit of anger. "Sal, a few weeks ago I heard whispers that Connie was up to something. I didn't have any proof until a couple days ago before we all went out. Some things I know for sure, but there are things I'm still working on. As for how, my friend recognized her when he saw her in a restaurant in South London. He thought the guy she was with was too friendly to treat a married woman like that in public. Sal, they thought they were outside the neighborhood and safe, I guess. And who is Tony Drew? Yes, you must know him. He's Phil's brother." I sat there mesmerized as his words came to me. The images of our evening of Phil and Connie and then Terry all came together in my mind. "I found a pen from a hotel in London. Is it there?" "Yes, Sal, I'm sorry, buddy, but my guy was following them early last week. I understand you were out of town. The first meeting happened when you weren't home either." I stared at him, my heart tense, my fist clenching and unclenching tightly. "I'm going to kill that bastard," I spat. "Easy, Sal. This could get you in trouble and she's not worth sitting out for, and neither is he. Divorce the bitch. Get rid of her and let me deal with him." "No, Carlo. As much as I respect you, I can't let this happen. I have to deal with that bastard myself, and he needs to know it was me too. Is he married?" "Do you know where he lives and works and all that? I have information that is in the envelope that will answer Sal, but don't do anything rash. We need to plan this carefully, and we don't want to be thrown in jail, do we? He's not married, but as far as I can tell, he's divorced, no kids. But he likes women, especially married ones. Maybe he doesn't want a commitment or something. Anyway, he shouldn't have stuck his nose in our pond. He'll regret it." His eyes turned cold when he said that, and I had no doubt that it wouldn't end well for my wife's lover. "Okay, so what are you up to?" I was still breathing hard and fast, but I was slowly pulling myself together as best I could. Before answering, he poured me a whiskey. "How well do you get along with your friend Phil?" I asked, "because he was acting a little strange in the restaurant with Terry and your wife. I was watching him. I think he knows what's going on, if that's the case. Can you call him a friend anymore? I saw it too, and I wonder if his wife was involved from the way they were acting. I don't see the point in sticking around any longer than necessary, Sal. I think we should bring the hammer down as soon as possible, but before that you need to see a lawyer. That is, if you want to get rid of her, Or are you going to try and make up with her? If it was an isolated incident, then maybe. But seeing something like this, I just can't get over it. It's all too much. The images will stay in my mind every time I look at it. I won't be able to forgive or forget. I understand, but in that case, you need to start defending yourself now. It may take some time, but if you plan it out first, you'll at least get some payoff, and believe me, you need it. I need to think about this, Carlo. I want them both to suffer, really suffer. He leaned forward and placed a business card in front of me. Divorce guy, he's ruthless. He doesn't take prisoners, strictly marked and bagged, no fiddling. I've already briefed him on your situation. All you have to do is call him and tell him go, and he'll take care of it. Trust me, he's good, plus he's a cousin. He laughed at that. We had cousins everywhere, and I couldn't help but smile. We sat around for another hour until we worked out a plan of action. I called Cousin Carlo and he sprang into action. We agreed not to serve it until everything was ready. In the meantime, I needed to find out how involved Phil and his wife Terry were. I left Carlos and drove slowly back to the house, my overloaded brain fighting for its sanity. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly I'm sure my fingerprints were still on it. I parked the car and headed for the door. But when I crossed the threshold, I didn't hear a sound. Connie was gone. On the kitchen table, I found a note. "I'll see Terry later, love you." I rolled it up and threw it in the trash. I called Carlo. She's gone to Terry, so she says. I know she's at Phil and Terry's right now, but Terry's not there, just Phil. I have a guy watching her like we agreed, and he'll be with her as long as we need him, okay? Of course. So where's Terry then? If she was the one she was going to see. If anything turns up in Sala, I'll let you know on your cell phone, okay? I sat down and looked at my watch. 3 hours later, Connie came home. "Hey, love, how was your day?" She stormed into the house and kissed me on the cheek, heading for the kitchen. It was fine. Carlo wanted to discuss something with me, but we're working on a plan to deal with it. She looked at me, expecting me to give her some details, but I didn't. I wanted her to ask me herself. After a minute, she did. It's just a personal cousin matter that needs to be settled. He thinks his wife is making a fool of him, so he needs some advice. I smiled at her, noticing the change in her expression as she tried to hold back her casual smile. "I'm sure it'll work out." She looked away, but I knew I'd still upset her a little. The rest of the weekend passed slowly. I couldn't bring myself to have sex with her no matter how much I wanted to. I kept seeing the pictures Carlo showed me of her and that bastard Tony. I couldn't understand how she could do it with him and still act normal around me. She was a much better liar and actress than I could have ever imagined. Saturday night went fine, but Sunday night she came over to my place and I could tell from her body language that she wanted to have some fun. "Sal, I need us to spend this night. I know you've been busy, but I need you now." "Please," she whimpered. "I did what I had to do. We made love." After which we lay on our backs, panting. "What's wrong, Sal? We've never done this before." She looked a little shocked. "I'm not sure. I just wanted to make sure you were mine. I think I love you, Connie, and I don't want to lose you, so I thought it might help. You won't lose me, silly." She threw her leg over mine, looking down at me. "I'm all yours, love." I kissed her lightly on the lips as her words tore at my heart. I had the image of her with Tony in front of me. So how could she only be mine? Damn lying whore. We lay quietly in bed, each with our own thoughts. I was disgusted and hurt that Connie could lie to me like that. I was angry and getting angrier by the minute. I slipped out of bed as soon as she fell asleep and went downstairs. I poured a large glass of JD and sat down at the computer. A message from Carlo appeared on the screen. I checked the time. It was a little after 1 o'clock in the morning. All the wheels are turning here and everything is happening just as we discussed. Okay, I thought all I need to do now is create a short sleepover for Wednesday, and we'll be on our way. I sent him a text back. Okay. An hour later I crawled back into bed and tried to sleep again, but the rage wasn't helping, and eventually I dozed off and managed to get a few hours of not too much sleep. I crawled out of bed and took a shower before getting dressed and heading downstairs. Connie greeted me with a smile and breakfast, coffee and toast. She moved a little cautiously in the morning, noticed my gaze and smiled. "You were a little wild last night, lover. I don't think I'll be ready for another round for a few days." She put her arms around my neck and kissed me again. I gasped and she pulled away. "It's okay." I smiled through a coughing fit. She sat down and sipped her coffee. "I need to stop by Leeds on Wednesday, do you mind?" She was looking at me over her cup, and I could almost see her brain working. "Just for one night?" she asked carelessly. "Yes, but I won't be back until late Thursday night. Does this have something to do with Carlo?" "Yes, and that cousin I told you about is nothing special, but he might need some support. Carlo gives me the creeps. I'm not sure what kind of support he could offer. You'd be surprised what a good friend he can be, but I wouldn't want to get on his bad side, connected or not. He knows how to solve problems too." I saw her face go slightly pale, but a plan was still brewing in her head. I looked at my watch and got up to leave. "I got to go, honey. I'll see you later and be a good girl while I'm gone." Before she could get up, I kissed the top of her head and walked through the door to the garage. I pulled out of the garage and drove down the driveway. I went to meet the lawyer and spent an hour with him going over options and signing papers. He was alert and had already gotten copies of the contents of the envelope. He confirmed that everything would be ready by Wednesday afternoon so I could pick up the paperwork. I ran to the bank and transferred all the money from our savings to a new account in my name only, and sent a large sum to Carlo to hold in my name as well. The current account was left as it was. It covered all the bills, so there was hardly any spare money. I emptied our safe deposit box of cash and jewelry, and opened a new account in my name only at another bank. I also stopped paying her the allowance from which she was funding her account. This would hit her fast, and she would be in trouble by the end of the month, I was sure. Satisfied, I went to my office and went about my routine daily business. My secretary, Sadie, was a great help, and I knew she could run the ship without me, and seemed to be doing a much better job of it. In between signing papers, I caught her eyes on me. I sighed and turned my chair around so that I was looking directly at her. I had known her for almost 5 years, and she had always been nothing but professional and fiercely loyal to the point where it seemed like a defense. She had always been polite and calm with Connie, but there was some hidden connection between them, I was sure. Connie had mentioned her attitude to her a few times, but I had always brushed it off, thinking it was a woman's problem in between them. I looked at her oval face, her piercing dark blue eyes looking at me with concern. She was still in a sleepy state, but I kissed her politely on the cheek as I passed her on my way to the garage. "I can't stop, my love. I need to get moving. I have a lot to do before I leave tomorrow. Love you." Connie watched in bewilderment as I disappeared through the doorway, and a few seconds later she heard my car pull out of the driveway and speed off down the highway. As she poured herself a cup of coffee, she sat there thinking about Tony. Everything had been so good until the last week. She had met Tony one night a few months ago when she was out with Terry. They were in a small club with a few friends when he walked in. Seeing his sister-in-law, he approached the group and, smiling, offered them all a drink. The girls smiled as they looked at the handsome guy who was considering them all. Terry noticed Tony and Connie looking into each other's eyes, and something flashed between them. "Stay away from Tony. He's a real piece of shit. He's even hit on me before. He'll go after anyone with a pulse, especially the married ones. Don't worry, Terry. I have my own cell, but he's a pretty smooth and good-looking guy. Weren't you even a little tempted?" Terry shook her head, looking at her friend. "One word don't." Terry did her friendly duty, but she could see that there was something going on behind her friend's eyes that she didn't like. The rest of the evening passed without incident as far as she could tell. However, Tony cornered Connie and gave her his phone number. Over the next few days, Tony somehow managed to get Connie's number, and he called her a couple times to spend a few innocent minutes chatting and flirting. By the time of the next bachelorette party, she knew Tony would be there again. This time, there was dancing on the program, and as soon as Tony had her in his arms, he set to work on seducing her. He showered her with flattery and compliments, making many small touches as they chatted. It wasn't until Terry grabbed her elbow that she realized she had spent the entire evening with him. She walked out of the club with her friend, who emphatically reprimanded her and urged her to stop it before anything bad happened. Connie still wasn't listening and brushed off her warnings, claiming that nothing bad had happened. As Terry led her away, Tony smiled. He wanted Connie and would get her sooner or later. Of that he was sure. Over the next few weeks, the phone calls became regular, the flirting intensified, and Connie's seduction began in earnest. That all changed when Terry had to cancel their regular night out, and Tony saw an opportunity during one of the calls. He managed to convince Connie to meet him at the club alone, as friends, of course. Connie had been mulling it over, but now the opportunity presented itself, and she jumped at it, too quickly agreeing to meet him. She dressed as usual to meet Terry, but it was different. She felt different. She had been hanging out with Tony. They had developed a relationship, and now she was ready to take it to the next level. She blushed when she thought about it. Maybe kissing or being kissed. Who knows? Grabbing her purse, she headed almost jogging towards the front door. This night had been the first, and from then on it was inevitable that there would be more. They'd had a hot evening. Tony was a skillful seducer. He drove her to his car and drove her to the Marriott Hotel. After spending quite a bit of time, she saw the time. Connie nearly panicked. In her haste to get cleaned up and dressed, she asked Tony to take her home as soon as possible. It would still take at least another 30 minutes. She texted Sal to say she was waiting for a cab and would be home soon. That night had scared Connie badly. But when she got to the house, Sal was already asleep, so she crawled into bed and hoped it would go away on its own in the morning. The night passed uneventfully, but her body still glowed and tingled at every thought of Tony entertaining her. She couldn't help but smile. For the next few weeks, not only did Connie not turn down the occasional girls' night out with Tony, but she met up with him during the day whenever she could. During Sal's sleepover, she spent the night with Tony at the hotel. After a few weeks, Terry guessed what Connie was up to and warned her friend to stop before she got caught. She even had a fight with her husband Phil about it and asked him to press Taunty to stop before things went south. Terry told Connie to calm down and that she had talked to Tony and also asked Phil to intervene. Tony was unattached, arrogant, and dismissive of Terry and his brother. Phil was torn between loyalty to his brother and loyalty to his friend Sal. It didn't help that Connie had lashed out at him in a restaurant when he asked her to stop seeing his brother as he was getting his own neck slapped by his wife. He was between a hammer and anvil, and there was no way out. The longer this went on, the harder it became to find a way out without causing serious problems. Connie knew it had to be over soon, and realized that the risk she was taking only made it more attractive to continue. It was dangerous if Sal found out about this. All hell would break loose. The scene in the restaurant was too close for comfort, and when Sal asked what was going on, things got out of hand. She sat sipping her coffee and thought back to her affair. She knew he didn't love her, and didn't want her in any way other than as an easy bed. But she was still drawn to him. She decided that tomorrow it would be over, that this would be the last time that she had to end it. But they would have one more night together. She was relieved that the decision had been made. But of course she still had to convince Tony of that as well. By the time I walked in the door, it was late. I had been trying to kill time all day, and the plans were already made. The paperwork from the lawyer was already in my car, and the official packet would be delivered by registered mail. Feeling the tension, I immediately headed for my trusty bottle of JD and poured a large drink. Connie watched me as I took a big sip and poured another. I was distraught, and looking at Connie, I was sure she was dealing with her own problems too. "Are you okay, Sal?" I didn't answer at first, taking another sip of my JD. I turned around and focused my gaze on her. I saw her reaction. She looked scared, worried, and a shiver ran through her that was almost noticeable. "Just a rough day, that's all, love. I need to take a shower and then get ready to talk to Carlo tomorrow." I walked past her and disappeared up the stairs before she realized I hadn't kissed her. She didn't like this atmosphere. It frightened her, and she knew why. But tomorrow it would be over. What did he mean by saying he had to get ready for tomorrow? She realized she didn't know anything more about what he was doing. I stood under the hot jets of water, tears streaming from my eyes, my marriage, my wife, my future. Everything was so messed up. After 30 minutes under the shower, I didn't feel any better. Even though I was cleansed, my heart was breaking, and I wanted to run away and hide. I was shaking, and I wasn't sure I could hold out much longer. Stepping out of the shower, I dried myself off and got dressed before heading downstairs. Connie gave me a look as I walked into the kitchen. I had picked myself up and pulled myself together. Now I had a game face. She relaxed a little too, having picked herself up, and I noticed it. Strangely, we both knew something was wrong and did our best not to ask questions that could ruin everything. "What's for dinner?" I asked as casually as possible. "I thought we could order something for a change. I don't feel like cooking tonight." "Sure, no problem. Are the Chinese okay?" "Yeah, that would be nice." I called, and while we waited, we sat in the living room to the sound of the television. Like two prize fighters, we looked at each other without drawing attention or wanting the confrontation that was in the air. Dinner passed quietly, almost in suspense. "What time do you have to go in the morning?" she asked carelessly. "I'll be out around 9 in the morning. We have a flight booked for 11, so we don't need to rush. It won't take long, although the problem is that we won't be able to meet the problem until tomorrow night. But anyway, it will be great to finally meet Cousin Carlo. You know how family is. It was almost 10 o'clock in the evening, and I thought she glanced at her watch. I need to turn to love. It's going to be a long day tomorrow." I stood up, drained my glass, and set it on the table. I looked at her, and I thought I saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. She got up and closed the door between us. "I want you to know, Connie, I've always loved you like no one else." I hugged her tightly. She felt his arms around her, and her heart filled with sadness and guilt. Tomorrow it will all be over, she thought to herself, and then I can make it up to him. I was thinking the same thing almost. I woke up to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling my nostrils, which I always loved in the morning. It brought back memories of my grandmother's house where coffee was always made. Strong and dark and incomparable odor. I walked down the stairs towards the strong aroma of the nectar. Connie was waiting for me with a large mug in her hands. I grabbed it and kissed her cheek before taking a sip of the oily liquid that helped me fully awake. I sat down and ate some toast, citing a rather full stomach after last night's dinner. There was silence in the kitchen as we drank our coffee. Each of us watched the other but averted our gaze so as not to be noticed. It was tense, and we both wanted it to be over. I glanced at my watch. "I have to go now, love. I need to be at Carlos to pick him up." I stood up and set my cup on the drain, emptying it. I felt myself take a deep breath, and a wave of emotion rose in my chest. I suppressed a sob, nearly passing out. I looked over at Connie and saw that she was trying to remain calm. But damn, she was tense. She must realize that I know. She looked up at him, smiling as he walked past her. "Have a safe trip and come back soon, Sal." She watched as he walked past her and gave her a polite kiss on the forehead. But the act puzzled her again. Grabbing his overnight bag, he headed toward the garage. Breathing a sigh of relief, I put the key in the ignition and started the car, which immediately roared to life. The garage door lifted, and I easily drove out into the cool morning air. With tears slowly brimming in my eyes, I spun the wheel and drove the car down the road away from my wife. I didn't look back, and I couldn't. My face was wet with tears, and my heart was heavy with sadness. The day of judgment had come. After a few minutes, Connie picked up the phone and listened to the sound in her ear. "He's gone. Are you still ready for tonight?" "Oh yeah, baby, definitely. We're going to make this a good night, too. I had to tell Phil to back off, Tony. He's been getting on my nerves lately. Did he say anything to you?" "Yeah, but I told him to back off, too. And his buddy wife, too. She's been on me, too. But she won't say anything, even though I know it." "Well, that won't stop us, baby. I'm looking forward to tonight. I got my buddy to get us the same room as before, so we're good. Room 415. Just get the key from the desk and I'll see you there at 8, okay?" "Okay, got it. I'll call you later." The couple hung up the phone, and the man smiled. He typed a message with the details of the lover's date, then picked up his listening equipment and left his post. Carlos saw the message and smiled grimly at Sal. Sitting in his office, he lamented his wife's callousness before contemplating his plan for the evening. "Are you sure you want to do this, Sal? I have to ask before this goes too far. You know how this is going to end, don't you?" I looked at my lifelong friend, seeing the deep concern in his eyes, and heard the warning in his words. "Carlo, I love that woman in a way I never have and never will. I gave her everything I had, and I can't let that go. I have to do something to make her realize what she's done and make her pay forever, just like her lover. I just have to do it, Carlo. Do you understand?" Carlo nodded sadly, seeing the pain in Sal's eyes and feeling it in his words. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a revolver, placing it on the table in front of Sal. The man looked at it, taking in the details of the weapon that was going to solve part of his problem. "We'll do whatever's necessary to make him realize what he's done and make sure he doesn't try anything like that again. You need the gun to make your point, okay?" He watched as Sal nodded silently, looking at the gun. Carlo pulled out a handful of shell casings and stacked them on the table next to the gun. The sight of the ammunition made it seem more real. "You need to load it up with Sal, if for no other reason than to reinforce in your mind that this is what you want to do, okay?" Sal reached out and took the gun in his hand. It seemed light, bringing back memories of times gone by. Carlo watched his friend load the gun with practiced ease, then put it back on the table. "What's up, Sal?" Sal nodded. "Okay. We have some time, so let's go eat, and I'll give you all the details. I'm thinking of calling Terry and Phil at some point to find out how much they know and ask why they didn't mention it to me. I'd leave it alone if they catch you now. You'll give the police proof of motive before it even happens. Leave it alone for now. There will be time later, don't worry." They walked to the entrance of the bar and Sal was introduced to Carlo's brother Alfredo. "It's nice to finally meet you, Sal." He smiled and shook his hand. The three men sat chatting amicably until a waitress entered, carrying plates of food that had obviously been prepared in advance without a word. The young waitress smiled at Sal and, turning, leaned toward him and said, "Hi, Sal. My Uncle Carlo has told me a lot about you. Nice to meet you. I'm Alicia." Alfredo smiled at Sal and led his daughter away. "Sal, forgive my daughter for her temper. She's stubborn like everyone these days. Alfredo, it is a pleasure to meet you and all of your family. It has been too long since we have been able to meet. Family is everything, as I'm sure you know. Please give my regards to your wife and the rest of your family." Alfredo smiled. "Thank you, I will." Lunch passed leisurely, amidst the customers entering the restaurant and creating a buzz behind them. Considering what they were discussing, it was unreal and yet strangely relaxing. Sal felt calm and safe. His cell phone rang just after 3 in the afternoon. He looked at the screen and saw it was Connie. "Hi, Connie. How are you? I called to see if you were okay. How's Carlo and his little problem?" "We're both fine. Thanks for asking. We're here, but we're having a late lunch before we go on." "What do you have planned for tonight, love?" He asked the question as he usually did, but he also wanted to hear her lie again. "I'm going to go see Terry. I think everything's fine there." "That's good. I was going to call Phil later anyway. I think he'll be out with his brother tonight." "I understand. I've never met him. What's he like?" "Oh, well, I've only met him once. He seems quite nice as far as I can tell. He looks like Phil. I have to run here, Connie. We need to get to the hotel before our evening meeting, so have a nice evening and say hi to Terry." "Okay. Love you. Bye, baby. Bye." When he cut the call, Carlo looked up and saw pain, but also something else. Anger, a deep, burning anger, something he knew very well, and something that had driven him down the path he had chosen in life until he had met Joanna. And she had done something to him that had never been done before. She had made him fall in love and be with her. "Okay, Sal. Yeah, it looks like we're ready to go." The men raised their glasses and made a toast, drinking all the drinks in one fell swoop. Time to get some rest before the show. Let's go meet the guys. They left Alfredo at the bar and headed for the private quarters. There, they found a group of 4 men who greeted them by shaking Salu's hand and hugging Carlo. Sal are very good friends of mine. I trust them with my life, and have done so many times in the past. They won't let you down. As I looked closer at the men, I saw that they were all a few years older than I was, and looked shabby, but their eyes were all the same, steely-eyed, strong and focused. I felt a shiver go through me. Reality was starting to hit me. "Still want that, Sal?" asked Carlo coldly. "Yes, I don't just want it, I need it." I looked at the men who smiled at me as if they understood how important this was to me too. "Okay, guys, is everything ready? Everything checked out? The cars are in place? The van? Access to the hotel and evacuation routes? Disposal?" For the next 30 minutes, the plan and all the points Carlo had mentioned were discussed until everyone was sure everything was ready. I could feel their eyes on me as I paced the room. I was tense and could feel the anger building up inside, and I wasn't sure I could control it for much longer. The realization that Connie was even now preparing to meet Tony was gut-wrenching. I wanted to punch someone or something. Carlo stepped toward me, blocking my path, and wrapped his big arms around me. "Easy, Sal. Easy. We'll be hitting the road soon. It'll get easier from here, son." The frustration and anger mixed with feelings of betrayal and loss brought tears to my eyes. Carlo walked beside me, and the men looked at him, and I could feel their sympathy enveloping me like some form of support. For the next hour, they all took turns talking and pushing me around as they needed me to play my part to the fullest as well. A phone call broke the mood, and all heads turned toward the pitiful sound. Carlo picked up the receiver. "Yeah." Everyone strained to hear something. "Okay, we'll start moving in 5 minutes." I looked at my watch. It was already 8 o'clock. Time had just flown by. The men left the room and headed to their car to get the van closer to their destination. Carlo looked at Sal. He was anxious. "Sal, last chance, you don't have to do this. That bastard has no respect for me or my family. I need to teach him a lesson. He'll never forget, and I damn well intend to. Good man." Carlo clapped me on the shoulder with a meaty hand as we walked out the back door and got into the parked Mercedes that had been prepared for us. That's how I came to the point where I was now parking the Mercedes on a side street about 200 yards from the hotel. We were sitting in silence when a little after 9 p.m., a text message arrived on Carlo's phone. He looked at it and nodded at me. "They've arrived." I felt my heart ache. Carlo saw my reaction, his hand on my shoulder now keeping me in touch with reality and trying to distract me from the thoughts in my head. "Let's stick to Sal's plan, okay?" I looked at him and nodded. I knew we would have to wait at least another hour before moving out. Another text came in. "The guys are here and already in place." Carlo smiled nervously at me. Their role depended on us getting in and out of the hotel discreetly, or realistically speaking, as discreetly as possible. We sat and discussed what we should do, and Carlo reminded me again not to let my emotions get out of control. We don't want to cause a riot and get ourselves into shit because of those 2 idiots, okay? His cold eyes sank into mine as he looked at me. I knew what was up, and now wasn't the time to mess things up. "All right, Carlo. I'm not shooting that bastard in the bed, even if I'm not that stupid." I smirked as he smacked me in the head. "Don't bullshit me, Sal. This is serious shit. Get a grip. Got it?" I nodded. We sat in silence until another message popped up on his cell phone. "We're in exit secured." Carlo glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was almost time. His heart began to quicken, and so did his breathing. Carlo pulled a brass knuckle from the glove compartment and opened the car door. He saw me watching just in case. "Okay, let's go." A moment later, I was already following him as he headed into the hotel lobby. We walked through the door and headed straight for the elevators, acting as casual as any other resident, but avoiding eye contact. I tried my best to relax and remain calm, but I was tense as hell. We stood and waited for the elevator to go up to the first floor. The elevator beeped, and the door slowly opened. We had to step aside as the couple exited the elevator, and then we stepped inside and stood impassively as the doors closed. We watched in silence as the floor indicator slowly rose to the 4th floor. All too quickly we arrived at the venue, and the door slowly opened. My heart was already racing. Carlo came out first and led me to the room. I saw the numbers 415 on the door and realized that my wife was on the other side of that door with another man. When we got to the door, the other 4 guys appeared as if out of nowhere. They were dressed in uniforms like the hotel and were pushing one of those laundry carts. There were subtle differences. They were all wearing wool hats, which I knew were easy to pull off so they wouldn't be recognized, and I also knew that at least one of them had a stun gun. I looked around and didn't see anyone in the hallway. Carlo also pointed out the security cameras that had been neutralized, and we figured we had about 5 minutes before anything unusual was noticed. We stepped back as the guys stood in front of the door. One of them held a keycard up to the door lock, and we all saw the green light come on and heard the door click open. Slowly, the door opened. We already knew the layout of the room, and the bedroom was at the end of the short hallway and away from the living room. We quickly headed towards the bedroom. As we passed through the living room, I recognized the lingerie and dress on the floor. My heart sank even lower, and my chest constricted as I realized I had seen it all before. We walked in silence to the open bedroom door. My face flushed. The guys avoided looking each other in the eye, but I could feel their sympathy. They were professional and focused. The plan was that the guys would go in first and get the bastard out of the room as quickly as possible, and I would then confront the bitch. Carlo led the guys into the bedroom. The lights were on, and only faintly illuminated the room, but from my seat I could see Tony entertaining my wife. The damn couple hadn't heard or seen the men enter the room. The rumble of the laundry cart had given them away. The noise made Tony turn his head slightly, and his eyes bulged as he realized there was someone else in the room. At that moment, the stun gun hit him in the ass. The impact made his body arch and jerk as he tried to pull away from the shocking burst of energy hitting his ass and passing through his body. Connie screamed as she felt him twitch and thrash and spasms on top of her. She didn't realize what was happening to her lover as she screamed and he continued to thrash and spasms. He collapsed on top of her, and 2 pairs of hands grabbed his arms and started to pull him off my wife. It all happened so fast the guys were nimble, and as Tony was pulled away from my wife and pulled out of her, she opened her mouth to scream but was immediately gagged. She looked up and was horrified to see masked men dragging her lover off the bed and into a laundry cart. In less than a minute he was gone, wheeled out of the room and taken to an unknown destination. Connie tried to get up but found her hands as well as her feet bound tightly with duct tape. I turned on the overhead light and went into the room, looking at my wife lying on the bed. And until a few minutes ago, she had been in the throes of passion with this piece of human garbage who, like Elvis, had already left the building. She looked at the masked men who were standing there looking at her. I grabbed my gun and pointed it at her face. She squirmed and tried to hide, clamping her eyes tightly shut, crying and mumbling. I came very close and didn't say a word, looking into her eyes. I saw the fear. I let it linger and flare up. I wanted her to be afraid. She had to be afraid. I felt Carlos' eyes on me. He was worried about me snapping. I knew it. She saw my finger tense up and somehow strangely relaxed. Carlos started to move, but before he could do so, I pulled the trigger and Connie closed her eyes. I was beyond love, hate, and every possible emotion, but rage was paramount. When Carlos grabbed my hand, the trigger came down with a loud snap. Connie pissed herself, wetting the bed, and Carlos snatched the gun from my hand. He looked at me with his steely eyes and, taking a heavy breath, started laughing. His eyes were all that was visible, but they told me he was furious. Connie went mad with fear and then shock, looking at the 2 men standing in front of her and looking down at her. She began shaking her head wildly from side to side, tears flowing as well. I looked at her in disgust. She was staring wide-eyed at the 2 silent men in front of her, and not a word was spoken in the 2 minutes it took to ruin her evening, and possibly the rest of her life. I stood in silence for almost another minute, not moving, looking at the bitch on the bed whose skin showed the marks of her lover's paws. Her eyes were fixed on mine. I could feel her fear. I grasped the edge of the mask and pulled it off. She gasped, and then passed out. I noticed a slight movement from Carlo, who was looking at his phone, and realized that it was time for us to leave. I followed Carlo out of the room, leaving Connie prostrate on the bed. We slipped down the stairs and used the exit at the back of the hotel to escape into the dark city. A few minutes later, we were at the car. We didn't speak during the drive back, each busy with our own thoughts. Carlos started the engine and we sped away, heading for the meeting place. "You took the bullets out, you bastard. I was worried for a second, thought you'd lost it." I grinned grimly. "Yeah, I wasn't going down for killing that bitch, just damn good to scare her. Guess the lesson will be learned when she sees Tony again. I'm sure the guys will do what they need to do with him. No need to get your hands dirty, Sal. I know it's important to you that he knows you were there, but I think you'll still remember it for a very long time. One way or another, I have to be sure about this." I stared grimly ahead as we wandered through the dark streets toward our destination. We walked into the bar where Alfredo was waiting for us. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning, so he poured us healthy drinks and we sat down in front of the fireplace in the back room. Gradually, as the adrenaline faded away, we began to feel human. I had been in a trance for the past few hours, a state where the real world was left out and only pain and anger lived on. Now in the warmth of the back room, we sat and ate in silence. Carlos' phone beeped and he read the message and smiled at me. "It's all done and settled. The boys are on their way. I know I can't thank them enough for everything they've done, but I'll never forget this night. Sal, shut up, it's over. Now you have other battles to fight. Now you need to deal with this bitch. And you don't have to please me, okay? Of course I understand. Nothing more needed to be said. I remembered that we had left her at the hotel and I wondered how she would get home and what, if anything, she would say about her adventure. Well, I had the rest of the day to kill before I got home as planned. Now she knew I was aware of her activities, but would she say anything or confess? I somehow doubted it, even knowing and catching her in the act. There are rooms prepared for both of you when you are ready. Fatigue seemed to come over me suddenly as I was shown to my room, my clothes off, and Alfredo took them away to dispose of them before I collapsed onto the bed. Sleep didn't come easily as I went over the events of the night and everything that led up to it. I also thought about Connie and the last time I had seen her. I was overcome with sadness and disgust at the same time. I had loved this woman for so long. She was my everything, and now it was all gone. All that was left was to face her and find out how it all ended. I already had the divorce papers. She was supposed to deliver the official copy to our house today. By the time I was due home, she would have no doubts about what I knew, but the thought suddenly crossed my mind. What if she didn't go home? Now that she knows it was me at the hotel, she'll be terrified and definitely won't want to go home. Shit, I'd better call and have the papers rerouted. Maybe to Terry's, yes, she'd go there. I was sure of it. After almost 7 hours or so, I was awakened from an uncomfortable sleep by Alicia, a mug of coffee under her nose and a smirk on her face. "It's lunchtime, Sal. You have 30 minutes. Carlos said you have an afternoon flight, so it's time to get up. Your change of clothes are on the dresser." She patted me on the shoulder and left the room. Slowly I got to my feet and got dressed. I looked in the mirror and saw a familiar face, but it was different. I was different. Last night I had almost killed a man, watched him being led away to certain death, but I felt nothing. In the moment I had no regrets. Whatever shit had befallen Tony was his own fault. I just hoped it would hurt like hell and last a long time. I joined the others at the table and normalcy seemed surreal, yet calming at the same time. We ate, chatted, and even laughed. Pretty soon it was time to leave. We packed up and walked to the car. Looking out the window as we drove away, I waved to the faces watching me leave. There was a mixture of pain and deep concern in them, and it was comforting in a way. I mentally promised myself to return as soon as possible, and next time, not to leave it so long. I drove home slowly, the kilometers ticking away, and like a countdown to Armageddon, I felt a growing dread. My anger was gone for the moment. All that was left was a big hole that was filled with love for my wife. I dropped Carlo off, and Joanna came out to meet him, grabbed him as he got out of the car, and hugged him like they were newlyweds. I felt a lump rise in my throat as she walked over to me and hugged me tightly. "Sal, it's going to be okay, understand? There's a tomorrow coming for you. I know things will seem hard for a while, but trust me, it's going to be okay." I couldn't speak, but Carlo gave me a manly hug, and I headed home to face the bitch. "Call me later, Sal." I nodded and drove away, trying not to think about anything. I felt empty. I put the key in the door and turned it. The house was empty. The heating was on, so it was warm but not very cozy. There were no sounds. I cautiously made my way into the living room, then into the kitchen. Nothing. I looked at the clock. It was already 6 o'clock. Connie should have been home. Unless, of course, she was trying to save our marriage. I checked my cell phone. No calls. No messages. I sank into the chair in the living room. "What a goddamn anticlimax," I muttered to myself. I felt my anger begin to rise again. It had been dormant, but was now waking up from its imposed slumber. I looked at the picture of Connie and I on the mantel, felt a surge of rage, grabbed it and threw it across the room. The heavy silver frame punched through the wall and the glass shattered. "Screw you!" I shouted. I was staring at the wall, breathing hard when I heard the phone ring. I grabbed the phone receiver. "Hello?" I shouted into the receiver. "Oh, I'm sorry, is that you, Sal?" the woman asked in a trembling voice. "Yes, that's right. Now what do you want?" My tone was loud, direct, and angry as hell. "It's Terry, Sal, she almost whispered. "Yes, Terry, I apologize for the bad timing. What can I do for you?" I breathed more slowly, trying to regain my composure. "It's Connie. She's here and she's in very serious condition. I can't figure out what happened, but something happened and she's not feeling well. She doesn't want to go home. She thinks you might hurt her somehow. I don't think she should be going anywhere right now and certainly not driving. Terry, is she in there?" I interjected decisively. "Yes, of course. Ask her to talk to me if she doesn't want to. It will tell me something and you should do it too. Then ask her what happened and see what she says." I heard some mumbling, then the voices got a little louder. Terry went back to his seat. "She won't say anything to Sal. I'm worried about her. Terry, be patient. Just tell her I'll pick her up and see what happens." I heard her say what I said to Connie, and then there was a scream from Connie. "Sal, I don't know what to tell you. Terry, I know it's okay. What do you mean, Sal? I know all that, Terry. Oh my God." I heard Terry relay my words. Then another howl sounded in the earpiece, followed by sobs and more screaming. "Sal, I'm so sorry. Me too, Terry. I know all about it. I know about the girls' nights out and how you and Phil fought about it." I heard her gasp. "Oh God, no. Yes, I know, and while I'm at it, I know exactly who and when I catch up with the little bastard, he's going to pay. Believe me, Sal, I'm sorry, but Phil couldn't convince them to stop. We both tried. I know we should have told you something, but we got into a bad situation." Terry spoke quickly, trying to get all the words out as quickly as possible. "Terry, rest assured, I don't blame you or Phil for what she did to Tony. I'm just saddened that you didn't tell me sooner. I'm afraid it has damaged our friendship. We won't talk about it again. Tell Connie I'm not coming to pick her up so she can relax, but her things will be packed and ready for her to pick up as soon as possible, or they'll go in the garbage can. I mean everything. She doesn't live here anymore. Lastly, she's getting some papers delivered today. I called the servers and had them forwarded to your address as I had a suspicion she might bolt to yours. I think they'll be there any minute. Tell that whore to think before she does anything, and especially before she calls me or anyone else. Got it?" "Okay, Sal." I hung up the phone and exhaled slowly. It was like I was holding my breath as I spoke. All the anger flowed out of me easily, and now there was nothing. I had said everything that needed to be said in that moment. I was calm now. I wasn't yelling at anyone. Inside, I felt like I wanted this, but I was alone and she was gone. Maybe she had been gone for a long time and I hadn't noticed. I missed the bitch. I hated her and loved her at the same time. I replayed over and over in my head. I must have been blind and stupid not to notice it. The more I thought about it, the more I noticed little signs that all was not well between us. The last few days had taken their toll on me, and sitting in the silence of the house, I suddenly felt exhausted. Things had really shifted, and now it was only a matter of time before the real shit broke between the two of us. I knew it was going to be very painful and personal. Sooner or later, I would have to confront the bitch, but right now, I was in no condition to fight her, but it would happen soon. There would be no forgiveness or quartering either. I sat down, uncorked the bottle of JD, and filling the glass with ice, poured a hefty portion. I sipped the dark nectar and savored its flavor as it warmed my throat. I sipped and somehow let my mind go blank, waiting for oblivion, or at least a state that would allow me to sleep. I slept like a log, and when I woke up, my mouth felt like a parrot's cage and my head was a little sore too. I showered and went downstairs, turned on the coffee maker and took a sip of orange juice from the carton. Toast appeared in the toaster and I started wandering around, waiting for the coffee to brew. It was 7:30 when the first bell rang. Hello? Sal, it's Carlo. Are you okay? I'm sorry it's so early, but I just wanted to make sure you were okay and hadn't done anything stupid yet. Yeah, I'm fine, just a headache. You don't worry, I've calmed down. She didn't go home but went to Terry and Phil's house. I talked to her and told her what I knew, so it's all out in the open now. I haven't heard anything since about 7:30 last night. I thought I'd hear after she was served, but from what Terry said, she still wasn't in the best condition when she arrived. Carlo laughed. It's no surprise, but things seem to be going as well as they can. I've heard from the lads that all is well on their side. The parcel has been delivered to the Midlands, but I don't expect to hear anything about it for a day or two. You know the drill. I won't be calling until tomorrow as I have some things to do today. The family sends their regards to you, understand? Understood. I'll talk to you soon, my friend. Don't hesitate. Click. I poured myself a coffee and sipped the black liquid. It was enough to clear my head of the fog caused by the alcohol. I started thinking about what to do today. I decided to call the office first and check on things, then call a locksmith, deal with the bank, etc. Screw everything that needed to be done. Although I didn't want to lose her, I knew I couldn't stay with her, as the trust we had was gone. I wasn't going to live in suspense wondering if she was cheating or not. No, it had to be done. I hadn't heard anything from Connie about the documents I knew had been handed to her last night, though I was sure I would hear something today once she got her act together. Just after 9, there was a quiet knock on the door. Well, this is it, I thought, heading for the door. I opened the door and saw Terry and Phil standing there, and I stared at both of them in silence. Terry broke the awkward silence. Sal, we came to apologize. It's the least we owe you. Can we come in and talk? I stepped back and held the door as they stepped inside. I closed the door and pointed to the living room. They sat together on the couch and I settled into the Shades lounge across from them. Okay, what did you guys want to say? Sal, we're both very sorry. Phil began. I'm sorry too, Phil. Very sorry. Sorry that 2 people I thought were my friends couldn't tell me that my wife had left me for some stranger. Too bad my wife wanted to have fun with someone else. Hell, I have a lot of regrets. I felt the anger rising in me again. Sal, we're sorry. We tried to tell her. Well, both of them. But they wouldn't listen. I don't know what she was thinking. She's at our place now, still doesn't understand anything, but it looks like something bad happened yesterday before she came back. Terry pleaded. What do you mean, Terry? All I know is that I had to leave on Wednesday while the paperwork was being prepared. I couldn't even look at her. I went to a meeting in Leeds, and then you called me. I assume you mean that something had happened between her and her lover, Tony. I wasn't going to volunteer any information or reveal my involvement just yet. We don't know. We haven't heard anything about my brother, Phil said. I've called him, but there's been no answer. He's not at the apartment either, and Connie can't say where he might be. Hell, she just mumbled something about being tied up and that he left her at the hotel. Come on, Phil. She should have said something more. What the hell happened? Obviously something happened. Did that bastard do something to her? Not that I give a shit. I don't care where that piece of garbage is now, but I'll tell you one thing. If I ever see him again, he better regret it. You understand? And you make sure he realizes it too. Phil and Terry looked at me, stunned by the fury of my tone. They had never seen me in such a state of rage before. Phil, in particular, understood my words and was visibly shaken by the thought. Anyway, aside from that asshole, how's Connie doing? I take it she was served her papers last night? Yes, Sal. After a while, she seemed to calm down, but when they served her food, she started up again. Sal, she kept mumbling something and didn't understand what had happened. It really got to her. When she came to us, she was upset, angry, but above all scared. And she won't say exactly what happened. Good, I thought. Hopefully this bitch will now remember every night what happened that night. Well, guys, I hate that bitch for what she did to me. So if she's in pain now, good, because I am too. She made her bed with that creaton, so she can stay with that bastard if that's what I care about. I'm done with her. They looked at me, unable to find words for my anger at Connie. Is there no way you can work things out with her, Sal? She made a mistake, but you two are so good together. Can't you at least try to work things out? Devours is a big step, Sal. Please talk to her first. She deserves at least that. Terry's voice trailed off as she pleaded with me, and I listened, looking into her eyes that were filling with tears. At least she was showing the emotions of a good friend. I paused, trying to look away from her eyes. I had always liked Terry Phil, too, and even after the way they were acting in this mess, I couldn't deny that Terry's words needed to be taken seriously. I knew I was going to have to talk to Connie sooner or later. Okay, I'll talk to her, but first, I want all her stuff gone. It'll just be her and me, and I'll call and let her know when and where. Are you okay with that? Terry rushed over to me, hugging me tightly while Phil looked around. That's all we can ask for, and probably more than she can expect. Yes, Sal, thank you. I'll tell her to expect your call. Please don't leave her too long, Sal. That would be cruel. Phil just looked at me. His face was sullen. Sal, I'm sorry, but my brother is an asshole. You should kick his ass properly. I wouldn't blame you one bit if you did. I watched out the window as the couple drove away. They quickly got in their car and drove off in the direction of my soon-to-be ex-wife. I sat back and considered Terry's words. Of course I needed to talk to Connie, but I needed to cool down a little before I trusted that bitch at arm's length. I poured more coffee, and the strong flavor left in my throat was a pleasure. Filling another large mug, I grabbed my phone, called Sadie, and caught up with her. For the next half hour, I listened to Sadie talk about how well Sadie was doing without me. What a woman. When she was done with that, she started telling me about Connie. God, it was like listening to my mom. Eventually, I was ordered to show up at her house tonight for dinner with her and her husband, and by the time I hung up the phone, my ears still buzzing, I was sure she was at least half Italian. The rest of the day was spent rearranging locks, bedrooms, clothes, photos, everything I could think of during the move that could be trashed, packed, or destroyed. By the end of the day, my anger, though still raging, had subsided a bit. I sat there exhausted from all the emotional trauma, and tears flowed easily down my face. I realized that I was probably walking away with the ends without talking to Connie, but subconsciously, I had made the decision to dump the bitch. Everything was ready. All that was left was to set up the final showdown, and I was under no illusions that I would be as hurt as she was. Goddamn bitch. How the hell could you do this to us? I sat staring out the window and thinking about how my marriage was crumbling. My heart ached and only pain kept my anger in check, at least for the moment. I knew I should make the call, but as I sipped another gin, I decided I would do it in the morning. I was too tired today to go a few hard rounds with this bitch. I wanted to be at ease when I did. I had another restless dream. I got the call early in the morning, again just before 7:30. The phone came to life and bells rang in my head, jolting my brain out of the half-dream I'd fallen into. Yeah, I asked as if stretching. Sal, it's me, Phil. Listen, I just got a call from the hospital. My brother's been there for a few days now. He's been beaten up pretty badly. He seems to be stable, but he's taken quite a beating. He has both arms and legs broken, and his balls are pretty well beaten up. I don't know anything else, so that's about it. I hope you don't expect me to sympathize, Phil. As far as I'm concerned, he's lucky he didn't meet me. I would have finished the job. Mark my words, if I ever see him again. It won't be long before I do. Sal, I understand. I wouldn't blame you if you did, so I won't ask the question. He got what he deserved. You're a stand-up guy and a friend, and I'm sorry I wasn't as good a friend to you as you were to me. I know I can't undo what's done, but I just thought you might want to know about Tony, that's all. Phil, it's not your fault. Remember that. It's just the way it is. Give my love to Terry. Bye and thanks. Sure. Bye. I replaced the tube and stared out the window at the garden, which was peaceful, with the occasional bird flocking to the bird table and eating the food I like to feed them. Sitting on the shades lounge and watching nature through the glass always calmed me down, helped me think, and today was no exception. I called Carlo on his cell phone to give him the news about Tony. He only snorted, but noted that the job was well done. His guys did well and got the result they needed. He laughed when I listed the list of injuries serious enough but not life-threatening unless he did something stupid. Carlo said he was sure he could give him the appropriate message just to behave, but I didn't think that was wise at the moment. I was sure Phil would convey my feelings, which would be better and safer. We left it at that, and I went back. Carlo said he was sure he could give him the appropriate message just to behave, but I didn't think that was wise at the moment. I was sure Phil would convey my feelings, which would be better and safer. We left it at that, and I went back to looking out the window. As I sipped my second coffee of the day, the phone rang again, but I let it go to the answering machine. As I listened, I heard Connie's voice hesitantly leaving a message. "Sal, please call me. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I need to explain. I need you. I need to come home. I'm so sorry." There were sobs between the pleas, and with each word, my heart sank as if it were being strangled in my chest. When the message ended, I found myself breathing heavily. I wanted to pick up the phone, but my hand wouldn't reach for it. Even the sound of that bitch's voice was still bugging me. I knew I would have to do it today, but I wanted her to wait so she wouldn't think I was answering her message. I wandered around the house for a couple more hours, and the house seemed somehow empty and deserted. I looked around where Connie's things used to be. There were voids. I called Sadie and asked a couple of guys to come over with a van to move all her stuff. An hour later, the boxes and bags I had packed were stacked in the back of the van. As I watched the van pull away towards Connie, I knew that pretty soon my phone would buzz as she picked up her stuff, and the realization that she had screwed up would hit home hard. It was a one-way trip. The phone rang again. It was Terry. "Sal, Connie's stuff has arrived, just letting you know we've accepted it. The guys apparently dropped most of it off at the warehouse. Thanks for that, Sal. We only have the stuff you marked as personal. Connie is still in shock. I know she called you earlier. Could you talk to her or call her later? Put her on Terry. Let's get this over with." I waited a few seconds before I heard her voice. "Hello?" came a frail voice to my ear. "Connie? Oh my God, Sal, I'm so sorry. I never meant to." "So you didn't think about the fact that you might get caught, huh?" I spat venomously. "Sal, I leave it, Connie. Now you have the answer to all those questions. You didn't even think to ask yourself all the time you were having fun with that low life." "Sal, can't we?" She began again. "Do you really think you can tell me anything that will make everything okay? Well then, do your best. I'm all ears. Can I come home and talk to you? Please?" I thought for a few seconds, trying to regain control of my emotions. Her voice was bugging me, and I could feel my heart pounding out of my chest as if trying to break free. My breathing quickened as my mind fought for control. Finally, I took a deep breath. "Tonight here at 7. Come or not, it's all the same to me. It's a one-time offer, and it's only valid until 5 minutes after 7. I'll listen, but I'm not promising anything." I heard her sigh at my rudeness and ended the conversation. I sat listening to her voice, and I could feel the pain in her voice. I wondered if she felt mine. I sat and reflected on my marriage and how happy I thought we were. Sure, we had our ups and downs, but I was sure we were happy, and that we hadn't had anyone else before that bastard. Then I thought about why I was so sure. Did I even know her? I hadn't suspected anything before, but that didn't mean she hadn't done it before. I felt confused again, trying to make sense of what I knew for sure, and the black cloud looming over me representing all the things I didn't know for sure. The clock chimed in the hallway. I knew it was past 6. I listened to the chimes, and they told me it was indeed 645. She, the horror, would be here soon, and I needed to control my emotions and prepare for what would surely be the last act of my marriage. The doorbell broke into my train of thought and shook me out of the fog of self-pity I'd fallen into. It crept up on me slowly as I tried not to think too deeply about what was ahead of me. I began to ask myself questions over and over again. Why? 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 Now freed from my gloomy thoughts, I took a step toward the door. Swinging it open, I saw Connie, the first time I had seen her since that night at the hotel. Her hair, though combed and neat, was pulled back, giving her face a rather gaunt look. There was very little makeup, further adding to the pallor of her face. Her shoulders seemed to slump and sag as she entered the lobby. I followed her and noticed that a few days make a difference when you are caught off guard as she was. I watched her look around the living room, gasping and then suppressing sobs as she noticed the gaps on the walls and in the room where the photos and memorabilia used to be. She looked at me with her hand over her mouth, tears in her eyes. "It's all gone," I said coldly. "If you look around the rest of the house, you'll see there are a lot of empty spaces." I paused for a moment before saying anything else. She looked at me again, tears rolling down her cheeks. "I didn't realize, Sal. I didn't mean for it to happen. I wasn't thinking. I know, but this is the result of your cheating. Your infidelity. Your extramarital sex with another man. All of it is yours. I hope you're satisfied." The words poured out sincerely and venomously, each word dealing a direct blow to my soon-to-be ex-wife. She sat down on the couch and I poured her a strong vodka and tonic. Handing it to her, I remained emotionless. She sipped the drink looking at me. I swirled the ice in my glass and taking a good sip, leaned back in my chair looking at her. "Okay, Connie, let's hear what you have to say." "I'm sorry, Sal, I couldn't help it. I got in over my head and then it got addictive. Connie, just so you know, I talked to Terry and Phil and they filled in the gaps in my knowledge. I know what and where and with whom, I just don't know why. I can't answer that question. It was so new and exciting. I guess I fell for his bullshit, but you had fun with him. Not once or even twice, but for weeks on end." I felt my rage building again and took a sip and a few deep breaths. She looked down at her feet. "I know I can't justify what I did, Sal. I was wrong. Is there any way we can get past this?" I dodged the question. "What about Tony? What happened to him? Where's the bastard?" Connie fidgeted and finally looked up at me, eyes fixed in mine, defiant, as she tried to figure out what to say. "We were caught in the hotel that night. There were people there. I think 5 or 6, but Tony was just taken 1 minute he was there, and then he was gone." "Did you set that up, Sal?" I stared back at her. I sipped my drink again, looking at her and ignoring her question, though I wondered if she realized it was me in her face that night before she passed out. It was horrible. They took him away and he disappeared. Then they tied me up, and the man put a gun to my head. I know he pulled the trigger, but at that moment I lost consciousness. I was terrified I was going to die. When I came to my senses, I was alone. She saw the smile on my face as I savored her discomfort. I watched as a shiver ran through her, and my eyes were locked on hers. "So, horror, what happened to your lover?" "Sal, don't call him that. He's not my lover. Yes, I know I had sex with him, but I have no feelings for him. I love you and only you. You love me so much that you've been having fun with this creep for freaking weeks now." She leaned back on the back of the couch at my sudden and furious outburst. "So, okay, slut. Tell me why I should give you the time of day since you've already proven yourself to be a liar and a cheat. How do I know everything you say is true? How the hell do you expect me to believe a single word you say? Tell me." Tears flowed down her cheeks as she saw and felt the depth of my anger at her for the first time. "So have you been communicating with your lover?" I asked again, deliberately choosing the word lovers knowing I'd already gotten her. I wanted to make her feel uncomfortable, make her lose her temper, make the bitch suffer like I suffered. She looked at me through her tears. "I haven't heard from him at all. All I know is he's in a hospital somewhere, and that's all Phil said. I don't want to hear anything about him. He ruined my life. I wish he was dead. Well, I couldn't agree more. I smirked. I sat watching her face, and I had little doubt that she was pissed about being caught and hung out to dry and on her ass. She had screwed up, and now she was getting what she deserved. We sat in silence for a few minutes, each of us watching the other, waiting for the opportune moment. I took my time. I had so much rage built up in me that I was wary of letting it loose. I wanted to slap her, but I had to stay in control. She looked around the living room again, searching for something to change the subject. She sighed when she realized that our wedding picture was missing from the mantel. As she stared at the empty spot, I met her gaze and looked at the dent in the wall to answer her question. She brought her hand up to her mouth. She got up and moved around the room to each empty space, and I sat and watched her absorb the missing memories. It seemed like every trace of her had disappeared from the first floor. She sank down on the couch. "Sal, all is lost. Is there really no chance?" She looked at me and defeat gleamed in her eyes. I took a deep breath. "Connie, I loved you like no one else. What you did was rip my heart out and stop on it. Doing that to that jerk was disrespectful and showed complete disregard for my feelings and those of our friends. You were seen openly with him in public, for crying out loud. You don't need to tell me it was just sex or I didn't want to hurt you. You did it, and now you're going to pay the price. Your lover has already started to pay for what he did, and rightly so. I will cripple him, but slowly. I'll destroy you just like you destroyed what we had. Connie, we're done, finito. Now I'm sorry I haven't heard anything from you to make me change my mind. So if you sign the divorce papers, we can both move on with our lives. I don't want to see her hear from you anymore. I'm done with you. Now get out of my house, you cheating whore." She sat there in complete shock as my words reached her. She had really messed up, but right now, at this moment, I didn't care about her. Anger would help me deal with her. She gathered herself and got up to leave. I followed her to the door. When she opened her car door, she looked back at me and muttered the word, "Sorry." I raised my hand with 2 fingers pointing forward and a gun-shaped thumb, and watched the recognition creep into her face. Click. She shrieked and nearly collapsed as she climbed into the car, and I closed the door behind her. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.